In the depths of space, aboard the Veritas, the most advanced scientific vessel of the Galactic Union, tension was palpable. At the center of a glittering auditorium filled with cutting-edge technology, a hologram of Earth floated in midair, slowly spinning. The serene-looking blue planet bore a sinister reputation, a death world, where survival was an unrelenting game of adaptation and violence. Dr. Zor, a renowned biologist from Zoran, took center stage. His furrowed brows reflected concern as he adjusted the hologram's controls. He pointed to a seemingly harmless creature, a rabbit. This mammal, though small, is a fascinating example of Earth's predatory and imbalanced ecosystem. Its ecological impact is devastating, he declared, glancing at the other scientists who murmured in disbelief. As the debate heated up, Commander Vorak, a stern military officer from the warrior race Dra, interrupted. "Are you suggesting that a rabbit is the reason Earth is feared?" he asked mockingly. Dr. Zor took a deep breath and adjusted the hologram, displaying images of fierce predators like wolves and bears. "No, Commander. The rabbit is merely an example. What defines Earth as a death world is that all its creatures have evolved to survive in the most hostile and unforgiving environment known. However, the true reason this planet is unique lies with its dominant species. Humans." A heavy silence fell over the hall like a drawn curtain. He continued, "Humans have survived and thrived not because they are the strongest, but because they are the most adaptable and resourceful." The hologram now displayed a video of a prehistoric human using sharpstones to hunt. And yet, they are not just survivors. Dr. Zor switched the display to show human cities and technologies. They have evolved to shape and overcome their environment, something we have never seen in any other species. However, before the debate could proceed further, a piercing alarm disrupted the discussion. A mechanical voice echoed through the ship. "Unidentified life form detected in Sector 7? The scientists' faces turned pale. Commander Vorak took charge of the situation. "All civilians must evacuate. Security team, follow me." Dr. Zor was about to leave when a young scientist burst into the room, panting. "It's a human!" he shouted. The silence that followed was not disbelief, but pure terror. The corridors of the Veritas were steeped in shadows, interrupted only by the flickering lights of emergency alarms. Dr. Zor followed Commander Vorak and his security team, who moved in tense formation toward Sector 7. The scientist's heart pounded in his chest. It was hard to fathom how a single human could have breached the defenses of a Galactic Union vessel, the most secure ever built. In Sector 7, amidst crates and advanced equipment, the team found the intruder. He was tall, muscular, and clad in a dark suit that seemed to absorb the light around him. In his hand, he held a compact weapon of unknown design. His eyes glimmered with cold determination. Vorak raised his plasma rifle and shouted, "You are surrounded. Surrender now, or be eliminated." The human tilted his head slightly and in a calm and controlled tone replied, "I'm not here to fight. I'm here to talk." Dr. Zor took a step forward, his scientific curiosity overriding his fear. "Talk? About what?" The human looked directly at Zor, ignoring the weapons aimed at him. "My name is Captain Mark Harris of Earth's Defense Force. I've come to deliver a message." "What message?" Vorak growled. Mark remained unshaken. "You need to stop your observations and studies of Earth. Your actions are harming us, and it will no longer be tolerated." The room fell silent, broken only by Vorak stepping forward, his weapon still trained on Mark. "Are you suggesting that a single person can threaten us?" Mark smiled, though the gesture lacked any humor. "I didn't come alone." Almost as if on cue, the ship's alarm blared again. Multiple unidentified lifeforms detected. Security breaches in additional sectors. Panic rippled through the room. Vorak narrowed his eyes, his tension now impossible to hide. "What's happening? How many of you are here?" Mark shrugged, his expression remaining calm. "Enough to ensure you hear our message?" Dr. Zor, though frightened, sensed something deeper in the situation. He decided to intervene. Commander, before we react, perhaps it would be wise to listen to what he has to say. Vorak hesitated. The guards' hands tightened around their weapons, but the commander eventually gave a short nod. Very well. You have 2 minutes. Speak. Mark relaxed his posture slightly, though his eyes remained vigilant. Your presence in Earth's orbit hasn't gone unnoticed. We know you're studying our planet, but the impact of your actions is greater than you realize. You're altering our ecosystems and causing changes you don't understand. Dr. Zor frowned. We had no idea our actions were causing direct impacts. Mark continued. Intentions don't matter. Results do. Earth is a death world. We've adapted to the hostility of our environment, but you're creating an instability that threatens us all. We've come to deliver an ultimatum. Leave Earth or face the consequences. The silence that followed was as heavy as the void of space. Consequences? Vorak laughed, though it was a nervous laugh. You are primitives. What kind of threat could you possibly pose to a ship like this? Mark leaned forward slightly, as if sharing a secret. It's not about technology. It's about resolve, about fighting for our home. He paused, letting the words sink in. And as I said, I'm not alone. The alarm blared again, louder and more urgent this time. The mechanical voice announced, "Intruding forces detected in the command core. Critical situation." Vorak clenched his jaw, the tension in the room becoming almost unbearable. Dr. Zor looked at Mark, and for the first time, didn't see just a human but a reflection of the indomitable spirit that made Earth both fascinating and terrifying. In the heart of the Veritas, chaos reigned. Alarms continued to blare, mixing with urgent voices over the communicators. Security forces rushed through the corridors, trying to contain multiple breaches. Meanwhile, Dr. Zor, Vorak, and Mark Harris moved toward the main control room. This is unacceptable. Vorak shouted, marching ahead. How did a handful of humans manage to bypass our security systems? Mark, walking calmly beside Zor, responded with the same composure as before. Don't underestimate our ability to adapt. The same instincts that allowed us to survive on our planet make us unpredictable to you. Dr. Zor, intrigued, turned to Harris. How exactly did you do this? Our ship is protected by technological barriers that should be impossible to penetrate. Harris offered a faint smile. We observed, we learned, and we infiltrated. You forgot one crucial thing. While you were studying Earth, we were studying you. Before more explanations could be given, a distant explosion echoed through the ship. Communications over the radio became frantic. Sector 3 compromised. Intruders advancing toward the power core. Vorak gripped his communicator in fury. Delta and Omega teams secure the core at all costs. Dr. Zor suddenly stopped, turning to Harris. You didn't come here just to deliver a message, did you? There's something more. What are you trying to accomplish here? Mark met his gaze and replied bluntly. We're proving a point. We want you to understand that despite all your technology, Earth is not an easy target. In the main command room, the scene was a whirlwind of activity. The ship's holographic display showed red dots spreading across critical sectors. Admiral Koch stood before the map, his eyes fixed on the data while officers hurried around him. When Vorak, Zor, and Harris entered, Koch turned to them, his expression a mix of anger and concern. Who is this? He demanded, pointing at Mark. Captain Mark Harris. Vorak answered sternly. He's leading the intruders. Claims to have a message, but this is clearly more than just words. Harris stepped forward, holding his ground under the Admiral's piercing gaze. Admiral Koch, my team is positioned to disable your ship systems. We can do it now, but we don't want violence. We only want you to listen to what we have to say. Koch crossed his arms, evaluating the man before him. And what exactly do you want? The Galactic Union must cease all incursions into Earth and respect our sovereignty. Every moment you remain in our orbit, you disrupt the balance of our planet. The officers in the room exchanged uneasy glances, but Koch remained impassive. Do you think you can force the Galactic Union to retreat with empty threats? Harris raised an eyebrow and gestured toward the hologram displaying the compromised sectors. "Does this look empty to you?" He took a deep breath before continuing. "Don't underestimate our resolve. We've learned to fight against an entire world that constantly tries to destroy us. You're just another obstacle." Coke clenched his fists, but before he could respond, Zor intervened. "Admiral, perhaps we should consider what he's saying. Earth is a unique ecosystem, and our actions might indeed be causing irreversible harm. Maybe it's time to rethink our approach." Coke looked at Zor, then at Harris, and finally at the hologram of the ship. He knew the situation was rapidly spiraling out of control, and if we agree, if we withdraw all operations from Earth's orbit, how can we be sure you won't see us as enemies in the future? Mark replied without hesitation. "You'll have our word. We're not conquerors. We only want to protect our home." In the back of the room, the communicators burst with new updates. "Sector 5 is under intruder control. We can't advance." Admiral Coke closed his eyes for a moment, contemplating. Finally, he opened them and spoke. "Very well. We'll take this to the Galactic Union Council. But know this, human. If this trust is betrayed, the consequences will be severe." Mark nodded slightly. "We don't want war. We want peace, but a fair peace." As the alarm subsided and the tension eased slightly, Dr. Zor looked at Mark with a mixture of admiration and fear. Earth wasn't just a death world, it was a world of indomitable survivors. At the center of the Veritas, a holographic transmission flickered to life, projecting the grand meeting chamber of the Galactic Council. The leaders of the most advanced races of the Galactic Union were gathered, their imposing figures seated in a semicircle. The live broadcast showed Admiral Coke, flanked by Commander Vorak and Dr. Zor, with Mark Harris standing just behind them. His presence seemed to inject palpable tension into the atmosphere. The voice of Elder Zenarian, one of the most respected minds in the galaxy, echoed through the chamber. "Admiral Coke, we've received your emergency message. Explain the situation." Coke, standing rigidly, replied, "We have humans aboard. They infiltrated the Veritas, bypassed our systems, and seized strategic sectors. They are here to deliver an ultimatum: that the Galactic Union cease all activities around Earth." The Council erupted into murmurs of concern. For many races present, Earth was little more than a small planet on the fringes of their known territory. Few had imagined its inhabitants capable of such audacity. Mark stepped forward, his figure commanding attention in the transmission. "I am Captain Mark Harris, representative of Earth's Defense Force. We've come because your actions are directly affecting our planet. Earth may be a death world, but it is our home, and we will not allow you to harm it, whether through scientific curiosity or by accident." The crystal ambassador of Vor, a luminous and translucent figure, leaned forward slightly. "Captain Harris, we believe your words are sincere, but how can you prove that our operations are causing such harms?" Mark, unwavering, responded, "Our biosphere is extremely sensitive. You've sent probes, extracted samples, and monitored our fauna. These activities are triggering changes you can't foresee. Species are reacting unpredictably, ecosystems are collapsing, and humans are beginning to notice these anomalies. We are trying to prevent an escalation." The room fell silent as Elder Zenarian deliberated. "You humans speak of balance, but you also have a long history of internal conflicts and environmental destruction. Why should we believe you can protect something you so often destroy?" Mark smiled faintly, though his expression remained serious. "Because we've learned, our history is filled with mistakes, but also with resilience. Every crisis has made us stronger. The difference is that when faced with external threats, we are united. You won't find weakness in our resolve to defend our home." Dr. Zor intervened, his voice cautious yet firm. "Counselors, as the lead scientist in the observations of Earth, I can confirm that Captain Harris may be correct. Our presence could be causing imbalances. Perhaps it's time to consider a more ethical and cooperative approach." The Crystal Ambassador tilted their head. "And if we refuse, what would the consequences be?" Mark remained steadfast. "Do not underestimate us. We may not have the technology you possess, but we have something you cannot replicate, the ability to turn disadvantages into strengths. As we demonstrated by infiltrating this ship, we know how to use the unexpected to our advantage. The transmission went silent for a moment. The council was divided. Some members favored a diplomatic withdrawal, while others advocated for a military response to what they saw as insolence. Finally, Elder Zenarian raised a hand, silencing the murmurs. Captain Harris, we will take your proposal seriously. However, we need assurances. If we agree to cease our activities, how can we be certain your species won't become a threat in the future? Mark leaned forward slightly in a gesture of respect. We do not seek conflict. We seek peace, but a fair peace. We are willing to establish diplomatic channels and share knowledge, provided you respect our sovereignty. The council deliberated briefly among themselves before Elder Zenarian made the final pronouncement. Very well, the Galactic Union will agree to cease all operations in Earth's orbit. This is a rare moment, but we believe this decision could pave the way for cooperation. We hope you will honor this opportunity. Mark gave a brief nod. Thank you. You will not regret this. As the transmission ended, a collective sigh of relief swept through the Veritas Command Center. Dr. Zor looked at Mark with newfound admiration. Earth had not only defended its sovereignty, but had also earned the respect of the galaxy. With the Galactic Council's decision made, the tension aboard the Veritas began to ease. However, uncertainty still hung in the air. The withdrawal of the Galactic Union from Earth's orbit wasn't just a diplomatic gesture, but a milestone in the relationship between galactic civilizations and humanity. Dr. Zor watched as the Veritas scientists and guards worked frantically to restore order to the ship. He approached Mark Harris, who was now surrounded by his team, recently reunited after their strategic incursions into various sectors. You didn't come here just to threaten us, Captain Harris, Zor said in a more reflective tone. There's more to this mission. What are you hoping to achieve beyond our withdrawals? Mark met his gaze with a thoughtful expression. We want more than respect, Dr. Zor. We want recognition. Earth isn't just a laboratory for your curiosity. It's a home. And we humans aren't just specimens. We are your equals, a civilization with the right to self-determination. Zor furrowed his brow. Recognition as members of the Galactic Unions? Mark shook his head. Not yet. We're in no rush to integrate into your world, but we want to lay the foundation for coexistence. An agreement that allows us to protect our independence while learning from one another. Commander Vorak approached, his distrust still evident. This sounds like an excuse to strengthen your planet and eventually become a threat. How can we trust you? Mark remained calm. You don't need to trust us immediately, Commander. But over time, actions will speak louder than words. Our resolve isn't a threat unless provoked. Meanwhile, in the command room, Admiral Koch was issuing orders for the withdrawal. All probes, orbital bases, and research stations were being deactivated. The process, though orderly, underscored the strategic impact of Mark Harris's mission. Admiral, Dr. Zor said as he entered the command room, perhaps we should use this moment to formalize a dialogue with the humans. They've demonstrated something rare. A strength that doesn't just come from weapons or technology, but from a resilient spirit. Koch, still reluctant, responded. Resilient or not, they exposed us. The ability to infiltrate our most advanced ship was a humiliation. We can't forget that. Mark, who had followed Zor, intervened. Admiral, the purpose of our mission wasn't to humiliate, but to show what's at stake. We understand the value of mutual respect, and that's what we want to build here. After a few seconds of contemplation, Koch sighed. Very well. We'll formalize an initial agreement. Dr. Zor, it will be your responsibility to establish the scientific and diplomatic groundwork for a limited cooperation. Captain Harris, I hope you understand that if this agreement is broken, the Galactic Union won't hesitate to respond. Mark nodded. Understood, Admiral. That's all we're asking for. A few hours later, the crew of the Veritas watched the departure of the human ships, which had approached the Veritas with impressive precision and left with the same skill. As the last probes were deactivated, the Earth system was once again isolated, but no longer unknown. Aboard the human ship, Mark Harris stared out the window, watching the distant glow of the stars. His team congratulated him on the mission's success, but he knew this was only the beginning. Did we get what we wanted? One of his team members asked. Mark smiled faintly. We got a chance. Now it's up to us to prove that we're more than just a death world. We're a world that deserves respect. Days had passed since the Galactic Union's withdrawal from the solar system. On Earth, the impact of Captain Mark Harris's mission began to resonate among global leaders. For the first time, humanity had positioned itself not merely as an isolated world, but as an active player in the vast expanse of the cosmos. At the Earth Defense Force headquarters, Mark met with scientists, military strategists, and diplomats. A hologram displaying the mission report filled the center of the room, showing images of the Veritas and recordings of the tense confrontation in the ship's core. We've been heard, but that doesn't mean we're safe, Mark began, his tone firm yet calm. The Galactic Union vastly outmatches us in technology and resources. Their withdrawal is a victory, but also a warning. We need to be prepared if they return, whether with diplomatic or hostile intentions. Dr. Elena Navarro, a veteran scientist, took the floor. I agree. Our biosphere may have a reprieve now, but the impact their probes caused still needs to be studied. Additionally, we must consider how to manage our relationship with such an advanced entity. Mark nodded. That's why we need to use this window of time to strengthen ourselves, not just militarily but diplomatically and scientifically. We need to show the galaxy that we can be allies, not enemies. Meanwhile, in an underground laboratory, Dr. Navarro conducted a detailed analysis of biological samples collected from the alien probes captured during the Galactic Union's early incursions. Her expression shifted between fascination and concern. They were further along in their observations than we imagined, she remarked to a colleague. There's evidence they were beginning to understand the adaptive patterns of our wildlife. If they had continued, they might have found ways to bypass our natural systems. Back at headquarters, Mark gathered his team to set priorities. First, we'll reinforce our defensive systems to ensure they can't monitor us without our knowledge. Second, we'll launch a program to study the technologies we observed aboard the Veritas. We need to learn from them as much as they tried to learn from us. Despite the serious atmosphere, there was a sense of hope in the room. For the first time, humanity had stood its ground against an external threat, not as victims, but as a civilization determined to protect its world. Aboard the Veritas, now en route back to the Galactic Union, Dr. Zor reflected on everything that had transpired. In the central laboratory, he reviewed the data he managed to save before the ship's evacuation. They didn't defeat us with strength. They defeated us with spirit, he murmured to himself. Commander Vorak entered the lab, observing the scientist lost in thought. Still thinking about the humans? Zor sighed and turned to him. I can't stop marveling at how remarkable they are. Not because they're strong or technologically advanced, but because of how they turn obstacles into opportunities. It's rare to see that in a species. Vorak crossed his arms. They exposed us, Zor. They showed us our weaknesses. We need to be ready if they decide to become a real threat in the future. Zor shook his head. Or perhaps we should learn from them. What I saw was more than survival. It was a lesson in resilience and adaptation. We may fear them, but we can also respect them. As the Veritas disappeared into hyperspace, leaving the solar system behind, Zor felt a mix of relief and curiosity. He knew this wasn't the end of humanity's interaction with the galaxy. It was merely the beginning of something greater. In the silence of an earthly night, Mark Harris stood atop a hill, gazing at the stars. Below him, the city pulsed with the rhythm of daily life, blissfully unaware that Earth had just challenged and triumphed over a galactic entity. In his hands, he held a small fragment of alien metal, reminder of what he had witnessed aboard the Veritas. As he reflected on the recent events, Dr. Elena Navarro joined him. Lost in thought? She asked, sitting beside him. Mark smiled faintly, his eyes still fixed on the sky. thinking about what comes next. We achieved a victory, but we also revealed who we are. Now, they know we're not just a scientific curiosity. We're a force to be reckoned with. Elena leaned back, her gaze following the stars. And that can be both a blessing and a curse. If we learn to navigate this balance, we can secure our place in the galaxy. But if we make mistakes, Mark nodded, finishing her thought, we could become a target. That's why we need to be smart, build diplomacy, but never let our guard down. Meanwhile, thousands of light years away, the Veritas arrived at the Galactic Union's core. Dr. Zor presented his report to the Council, emphasizing both humanity's resilience and the need for a more ethical and respectful approach to future planetary explorations. Elder Zenarian, after hearing the detailed account, concluded, Earth is not just a death world. It's a world that defies expectations and redefines the meaning of survival. We must approach them not as curiosities, but as equals. The decision to exclude Earth from future incursions was formalized, and an initial diplomatic channel was established. Yet among the leaders of the Galactic Union, there was a silent consensus. Humans were an enigma. Their capabilities went beyond what any other known species had demonstrated. Back on Earth, Mark reconvened with his team, now laying the groundwork for the next steps. The room buzzed with activity, filled with screens displaying simulations, defense schematics, and scientific analyses. We'll turn what we've learned into strength, Mark told his team, not just to defend ourselves, but to unite as a species. Earth will face the universe as one. Elena smiled at his words. It seems we gained more than a victory. We gained a chance to redefine what it means to be human. Mark glanced at her, then at the hologram of the galaxy. Exactly. We're not just survivors of a death world. We're visionaries, and now the entire universe knows it. As the stars shimmered above, the planet Earth stood firm, isolated, yet now aware of its place in the cosmos. The humans, inhabitants of the most hostile planet ever observed, had not just survived, but had proven they were ready to shape their destiny, with courage, ingenuity, and an unbreakable spirit. The galaxy would never be the same again.